lights up here in the middle of the background anyway. And we are starting a brand new series today called My Story. And the whole idea behind this series, this is so cool. We believe that your life is kind of like a story. It's kind of like your story. And what's even cooler is that at this moment, everybody in this room, I can't speak for the future, I can't even speak for 1 hour from right now, but at this moment, your story is still being written. And the decisions that you have made in the past have led you to this place in your story. There are times I look back on my life and I start to realize that some of the decisions that I made, some of the good decisions that have brought me to where I am, and the being able to stand here in front of you today, and then I look at some of the maybe not so good decisions that I have made that I regret and wish that I could go back and change. But listen, every decision that you've made from your life from the very beginning till now has kind of brought you to this place. And it's a part of your story. But here's the even better news. You guys ready for this?
Yes.
Just waiting. Every decision that you make today, moving forward, is going to be a part of the story that you have to tell for the rest of your life. And so listen, this series is going to be called My Story, Living a Better Story, or living the story that you want to tell one day, no matter how old or young you are right now. You are going to be sitting somewhere, and you're going to be telling potentially your kids or your grandkids or your great-grandkids or maybe even your great-great-grandkids. I don't know. You're going to be telling them parts of your story. And the decisions that you make from this moment forward, today, tomorrow, and beyond, will have a profound impact on your story for the future. So no pressure. But every decision that you make. And so the whole idea behind this series is this, is that we want you to realize that the decisions you make going forward have that profound impact. And maybe, just maybe, you're not living completely the story that you want to tell. Maybe you're not living the story that you really want your kids or grandkids or great-grandkids to know. Maybe you're not living the story right now that you want to live. And I want to tell you that it's never too late. It's never too late to start. It's never too late to stop. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to believe. And so every moment of every day, I want you to be thinking about your story. And what I love about the story that we just heard, Vic's story. Give it up for Vic. What I love about this story, if I had to pick one story or one common theme that I've heard, maybe more than from anybody else, more than anything else since I've been here about 5 years ago, it was this. You know what? I used to go to church when I was a kid. I grew up in a Catholic church, or I grew up in a Baptist church, or I grew up somewhere, and I went to church every single Sunday. Mom made me go. Grandma made me go. They dropped me. I don't even have people do this. They dropped me off. They wouldn't go, but they dropped me off and made me go. They just wanted an hour away from me, I think. And I grew up there, and I went there until I was 17 years old, until I was 18 years old, until I graduated high school. And then guess what happened? I dropped it because it wasn't for me. It wasn't my faith. If I had to pick a story that I've heard, maybe more than any other story, it was that one. Or maybe it's a story that says, you know what? When I was a kid, I went to Vacation Bible School. You guys know what that is?
Yep.
The old thing that churches do. And I went to this Vacation Bible School, and I prayed a prayer. And this prayer, I know that it changed me from that moment forward for the rest of my life. They told me that if I repeated this prayer, that I would be saved from hell, and I didn't want to go to hell because they described it really bad. And they showed me a picture. I didn't want to go there. And so I said, okay, I'll repeat anything you tell me if I can avoid going there. And then you think, okay, so I'm good to go. Or maybe you went to a camp when you were 13 or 14, and they told you something similar. And they said, if you will pray like us and believe like us and do what we tell you to do, then guess what? You're going to get to go to heaven. And so a 13-year-old you says, well, I don't want to go anywhere else. So let's do this. And you prayed a prayer and you did the thing. Or maybe you just went to church your whole life and you learned all the stories and you got it. Or maybe you're just going to church right now trying to figure all this out and you think that you've got it. But no change ever happened in you. Or maybe you read one of these things somewhere that we call a tract. Anybody ever heard of a thing called a gospel tract? When I was first coming up as a Christian, they told me that this is how you reach people for Jesus. Check this thing out. It looks something like this. It's this little trifold book. Sometimes it's just a single page, whatever it is. But basically, what this little book tells you, this little booklet tells you, is how to get to heaven. If you died right now, Where would you go? Would you go to heaven? That's the kind of thing. And they lay out over the next couple pages how you're supposed to get to heaven. And it always ends, guess what? With you praying that prayer that says, I'm a sinner, I need your help, and that's it. And if you do that, guess what? You're guaranteed to go to heaven. Or maybe you saw one like this. They started getting kind of creative with these things. Anybody ever play a game of Monopoly before? Anybody ever play a game of Monopoly that didn't end up in anger? No, they did. You didn't? You didn't. It's not possible. People would leave these laying around. Get out of hell free card. You turn it over and it tells you how to get out of hell free. And I love the last line there. Offer will expire when you do. That's great, right? I once saw, this is one of the most depressing moments of my life. I was about 19 or 20 years old. I was eating with a group of pastors, and I saw a pastor, probably 15, 20 years older than me. We were at a restaurant, and he was getting ready to tip the waiter or waitress. And he pulls out a $10 bill, and I thought, this is fantastic. This is a good tip for like a $12 bill. This is great. And he says, and he opened it up, and it said, you thought this was a tip, but the real tip is come to Jesus. I wanted to go back in and give that person money that I didn't have and apologize and say, I had no idea who that guy was. And just sat down at my table. Right? Absolutely crazy, absolutely insane. And we started getting creative with these things, and we started putting them in random places, like we put them in the gas station bathroom, because everybody loves to pick up things and take them out of the gas station bathroom, right? It's a great place to grab items. Or you started putting them, this is my personal favorite. Some of you won't even get this, but you had to put them, you would go to Blockbuster Video, and you would rent your VHS cassette, and you would put the track inside there, and you would close it up so that the next person that rented it would see it. Only a few of you got that. The rest of you need to go Google VHS, VCR tapes, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. One time I was riding with a pastor, and he handed me one of these tracks. I wish this was a joke. He handed me this track, and he says, I want you to hold it out the window. He slowed the car down, moved over a little bit. He says, I want you to let it go when I tell you to. He said, 3, 2, 1, let it go. And it flew, and it landed right in front of somebody who was walking on the sidewalk. I was like, you spent way too much time with this. They walked right over it. But the deal is, you may have at some point prayed that prayer, or heard that line, or somebody told you the most important thing you can do is just believe this line and you're going to be okay. And here's my fear. I fear that we have a lot of churches that are filled this morning with people who have prayed that prayer, who have said that this is what they want to do, but it had absolutely no impact on their life whatsoever. It never changed. As a matter of fact, according to a recent Barna survey, more than 50% of all Americans, that's like over 150 million people, have prayed a prayer like that at this point in their lives. And over 70% of Americans a few years ago still claimed to be a Christian because they didn't want to claim to be anything else. But less than half of those people, less than half, are involved in the church in any way. Less than half would claim that they believe the Bible, much less do what it says. Less than half would claim that they have any change in their life whatsoever. These are dangerous statistics. I was hoping that you guys would all just gasp when I said that. These are dangerous things because if you really experience a life-changing relationship with Jesus, it should change you. Let's take it like this. Think about it like this. Let's pretend that I was late coming up onto the stage today. I was late getting here, and you guys were all just sitting here like, what's going on? What are we doing? And I walked up to you, and I said, sorry, guys, I'm sorry I'm late. I just got hit by a bus. What would you say? No, you didn't. No, you didn't, because if you just got hit by a bus, your face would look a little bit different. At least most of you would think that. You would have some broken bones. You might be bleeding if you got hit by a bus. And that's just as unbelievable to me as someone who says that they have experienced a relationship with Jesus, but their life has experienced no change whatsoever. And so maybe your story here today is this. I prayed a prayer. I went to church when I was a kid. I went to VBS when I was a kid. I went through the motions. I'm even going through the motions right now. But it has never changed me. And I don't even think about it. It's just something that I do. And if you're here today and that's your story, I want to tell you that your story can change. And that a relationship with Jesus is more than just going to church. And it's more than just praying a prayer. It is so much more than that. It actually makes a difference in your life. So what is your story? I want to tell you guys a story from the Bible today that I have found. It's one of my favorite stories in the entire New Testament. It's about a guy named Nicodemus. And Nicodemus, he was a Jewish leading guy. He was one of the guys on the Jewish council. He was this thing they call a Pharisee, meaning that he was really good at being a Jewish guy. He was born into this faith. He knew everything that there was to know about the Old Testament, about the Bible that they had at that time, so much so that he was put on a leading council. And Jesus is going to have a conversation with him. And if there's one person in the Bible, in the New Testament especially, that I think kind of fits the story that we're talking about today, it's Nicodemus, because he was born into a faith, but he failed to recognize how God was changing things around him. But before we get to Nicodemus' particular part of the story, I want to read to you guys from a couple of verses from right before that, right before the conversation. So this is John chapter 2, if you have your Bible. We're going to start at verse 23. It says this: Now while he was in Jerusalem, at the Passover festival, many people saw the signs he was performing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. What did that mean? He would not entrust himself to them. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. In other words, Jesus looked at their faith and he didn't buy it, because he knew their faith was something, there was something wrong. He knew that their faith was this thing that we're going to call kiddie pool faith. Everybody say kiddie pool faith.
Kiddie pool faith.
Okay, this is important. Deep theological stuff right here. Remember when you had small kids, or maybe when you were a small kid? I remember this from a few years ago. We took our kids up to this place called the Great Escape. It's an indoor water park just an hour or so north of here. And I remember going and being excited to do this with my kids. And we had a 1-year-old, and it just never dawned on me that he wasn't going to do the biggest water slide. I thought we're going to do this as a family and it's going to be great. But guess what the 1-year-old wanted to do? Stay in the kiddie pool where the water's this deep. And so guess what one of the adults had to do at all times?
Stay in the kiddie pool.
Stay in the kiddie pool where the water is this deep. And you never do anything fun. At all. You just stand there. Now, here's the question. How many of us in our faith have stayed there in the kiddie pool? And we have a kiddie pool version of Jesus where we can look out and we see the slides. We see the wave pool. We see everything that they're supposed to go. But we just stay right where we are. And we have this superficial version of our... It's almost like we've been immunized. You guys know how immunizations work, right? Not arguing for or against it. We're not making any political statements. So we're clear. I'm just saying that an immunization works like this. You usually get infected with some usually dead or non-potent version of a disease. And it develops antibodies in you so that when you encounter the real thing, it doesn't work. It doesn't take effect. And I think that for some of us, the amount of Jesus that you got when you were a kid or when you went to church or when you went to VBS or when you saw that tract and you prayed that prayer, it immunized you. To the place where you say, you know what, when the real thing comes along, I don't need it anymore because I'm good. I'm good to go. And that's exactly what these guys were doing. They saw Jesus. They saw his miracles. And they were like, that's cool. But Jesus spotted them immediately. And he knew that their interest was a fleeting interest. He knew that the second that they saw something else better, they would run away and they would go to that. He knew that their curiosity wasn't a real curiosity. They were just excited about the miracles. And he was thinking, the only reason that they're following me is because I might do something for them. And the next time I don't do something that they want me to do, they're going to run away. That was their interest. And so he knew their hearts, and he knew that they weren't serious. He knew that they had a kiddie pool version of him. And there's a real danger in this kind of faith. Now, when we get to John chapter 3, next chapter, we're going to begin to understand a little bit more about how to have a real life-changing faith that goes beyond the kiddie pool. You guys want to get out of the kiddie pool, right?
Yep.
It's boring. Nothing to it. And it's dangerous. Kiddie pool's dangerous. That's your quote of the day. And we've got to get beyond that. And so check out what Jesus said to Nicodemus. Now, there was a Pharisee, a man named Nicodemus, who was a member of the Jewish ruling council. There's our guy. I told you he was real. He came to Jesus at night. And by the way, just so we know, if you guys are familiar with the TV station Nickelodeon, this is how they got their Nick at Night programming. So it comes straight from the Bible. Nick at Night. I was afraid that joke was going to fall flat, and I was going to apologize. You guys are fantastic. Jesus at night and said, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one can perform the signs you are doing if God were not with him. In other words, Jesus, I'm one of that crowd that just likes your signs and wonders. But I need to know some things. And so Nicodemus, he comes to Jesus with some questions. He's got questions that he needs answered. And Jesus, before Nicodemus can answer any of his questions, or before Nicodemus can ask any of his questions, Jesus starts answering questions. You don't hear a question, but Jesus starts answering questions. And Jesus replied, very truly, I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. Wait, what? Did Nicodemus ask that? Had anybody ever even heard of that? And what in the world does that mean, born again? Literally, this phrase, if you kind of replay it or go back to the original language, it really means made new, made into something brand new. It's not a literal rebirth, obviously. It is a being made into something brand new that wasn't there before. And Paul, later, another guy who wrote a lot of the Bible, he would later come around and he would say something similar. He would say, you have to become a new creation. You have to become a new creation. And so literally, Jesus looks at Nicodemus, who hasn't even asked a question yet. And Nicodemus is like, hey, I like your miracles. Jesus says, well, you need to be born again. And Nicodemus instantly began laughing. I can hear this conversation. And he said, how can someone be born when they are old? Nicodemus asked, surely they cannot enter a second time into their mother's womb to be born. See, there you go again, Jesus, just saying crazy things. And Jesus answered, well, very truly I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God. Now, this was a big deal because Nicodemus, if there was somebody that had ownership in the kingdom of God, it was Nicodemus. And he says, you can't go into the kingdom of God unless you're born of water and the Spirit. He just wanted to clear everything up. Make it easy, right? Now Nicodemus got it. Water and Spirit. We'll come back to that in a second. And he says this, flesh gives birth to flesh. Now, this was a direct cut at Nicodemus. Because he was like, Nicodemus, you were born into this relationship with God. It was never yours. You were born into it. Meaning you were a Jew. You were born a Jew. You were given all of this stuff. Flesh gives birth to flesh. But Spirit gives birth to Spirit. In other words, there's something else that's at work here, Nicodemus. You should not be surprised at my saying, you must be born again. And this phrase, born again, made new, this is the genuine turning point of faith. Because despite Nicodemus' good works, despite his stellar church attendance, despite everything that he had going on for his life, Jesus tells him, you're missing something. You need something desperately. And it's to be made new. Now, this is really interesting. A lot of pastors won't say it this way, but I'm going to say it this way to explain it really well. Jesus is bad news before he's good news. I'll say that again because you're all looking at me like I'm a heretic. Now you're going to Google what heretic means. Jesus is bad news before he's good news, because in order for you to truly understand how great this news that Jesus came to die on the cross is, you have to understand how bad it is. You see, there's this thing that we have within us, we call it sin. It's the thing that separates us from God. It's the thing where we say, God, I know that you want us to do this, but we're going to do this. It's just this disobedient thing within every single one of us. You have it. Don't try to look around for it. It's there. Trust me. Now, if we have this, what God said is that this thing, this sin, this separation that happened a long, long time ago, it has severed our ties to God and created a curse in this world that's on us and on everything. And you guys see the results of this curse, right? You see the sickness, the disease, the anger, the war, everything, hate, all this is a result of this curse. You're living under the curse. Turn to the person beside you and say, see, I told you, you're cursed. Okay, this is just to wake you up a little bit. We're living under this curse. But then, Jesus says, listen, if you want to be free from this, if if you want to have life from this, there's something you have to do. And there's good news. And then he goes on and he says this, I will sprinkle clean water on you. This is actually from Ezekiel chapter 36, because he's referencing that whole water and spirit thing. He's referencing this. It says this, I will sprinkle water on you and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all of your impurities and all of your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh, and I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. In other words, something brand new has to happen. And then he goes on, Jesus in the story, he goes on with this. He says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness. That's a great way to start a sentence, right? Now, Nicodemus would have understood this. This goes all the way back to a story in the book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Bible. Really, really fascinating read at some points of it. And there's this time when Israel, they're trying to head to the promised land, the land that God promised them. They've escaped Egypt. They're in slavery. They escaped Egypt, and they're heading towards the promised land. They're out in this desert. And then all of a sudden, all the people of Israel, they begin getting frustrated, impatient. They begin doubting who God is. They begin doubting God's goodness. And so they begin turning to other gods. They begin turning to idols, and they begin worshiping those idols. Well, this doesn't make God very happy. And so in one day, God said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send a bunch of snakes, like fiery snakes, fiery vipers. Anybody scared of snakes in the room? Okay, a few of you. Okay, if it's not snakes for you, maybe it's spiders. Anybody scared of spiders? Okay, if it's not snakes or spiders, maybe it's toddlers. Whatever it is for you. He sends these snakes, these fiery snakes into camp, and they begin attacking and biting everybody from Israel. But you didn't know that was in the Bible, right? Or for you, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's the spiders or the toddlers, whatever. The dirty diapers everywhere, snotty noses all around you, and the people of Israel begin to wail in pain. And God says, okay, listen, Moses, here's what you're going to do for these people. Since they are struggling with these vipers, what I want you to do is I want you to make a bronze snake, and I want you to put it on a stick, and I want you to put it on a hill, and tell the people that if they will look to that, they will be healed and set free from these snakes. This is great imagery that you have to understand. You have to understand just how powerful this is. And so the people in their desperation, they begin looking up to this snake. And then Jesus says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man, must be lifted up, that whoever believes may have eternal life in him. Because God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. So in other words, Nicodemus, I know your story. And your story is that you went to church your whole life. And you kind of got it, you know the words, but you have never experienced that moment that truly changed you. And it's not about just going through the motions. It's not about just trying to be better. Nicodemus, you have to be made new. You have to be born again. And God loved you so much that he sent Jesus to die so that you can be born again. And all you have to do is look at him. Take your eyes off of everything else and put them squarely on him. I want to read you guys a story that I found so cool. It's from a pastor, preacher, theologian from a while back named Charles Spurgeon. You may have heard of him. I want you to hear this story that he tells about this moment in his life. Since I sometimes think that I might have been in darkness and despair until now, had it not been for the goodness of God in sending a snowstorm one Sunday morning, while I was going to a certain place of worship, when I could go no further, I turned down a side street and came to a little primitive Methodist chapel. In that chapel, there may have been a dozen or 15 people. I heard of the primitive Methodists, how they sang so loudly that they made people's heads ache. Take notes here, guys. But that did not matter to me. I wanted to know how I might be saved, how I might be born again, how I might be made new. And if they could tell me that, I did not care how much they made my head ache. The minister did not come in that morning. He was snowed in. At last, a very thin-looking man, a shoemaker or tailor or something of that sort, went up to the pulpit to preach. Now, it is well that preachers should be instructed. This man was really stupid.
What?
He was obliged to stick to his text for the simple reason that he had little else to say. The text was, "Look unto me and be saved, all the ends of the earth." He didn't even pronounce the words right. But it did not matter. There was, I thought, a glimpse of hope for me in that text. The preacher began, "My dear friends, this is a very simple text. It says, look." Now, looking doesn't take a great deal of pain, and like it ain't lifting your foot or your finger. It is just looking. Well, a man needn't go to college to learn to look. You may be the biggest fool, and yet you can look. A man needn't be worth 1,000 a year to be able to look. This was a different time. Anyone can look. Even a child can look. But the text says, "Look unto me and be saved." Then the good man followed up his text in this way. "Look unto me, I'm sweating the drops of blood. Look unto me, I'm hanging on the cross. Look unto me, I'm dead and buried. Look unto me, I rise again. Look unto me, I ascend to heaven. Look unto me, I'm sitting at the Father's right hand. Oh, poor sinner, look unto me, look unto me." When he had gone about that length and man had just been out 10 minutes or so, he was at the end of his sermon because he had nothing else to say. Then he looked at me. You're going to love this part. Under the gallery. And I dare say with so few present, he must have known that I was a stranger. Fixing his eyes on me, as if he knew my heart, he said, "Young man, you look very miserable." Man, I'm going to start. I'm going to take some notes here. This is great. Well, I did. But I had not been accustomed to having remarks made from the pulpit on my personal appearance. However, it was a good blow. It struck home. And he continued, "And you will always be miserable. Miserable in life and miserable in death if you don't obey this text. But if you obey in this moment, you will be saved. You will be made new. You will be born again." Then lifting up his hands, he shouted, as only a primitive Methodist could do, "Young man, look to Jesus. Look, look, look. You have nothing to do but look and live." And in that moment, his life was transformed. He was made new. And listen to me. If you haven't experienced the moment, if you've been going to church and going through the motions, but you haven't experienced that moment where you have fully embraced Jesus and what he did for you, and it has changed you to where your first thought is Jesus, your last thought is Jesus. How can I serve Jesus? I'm here to tell you that there is a better relationship, that you can have a better story. I want you guys to stand with me for a second. I'm just going to ask you a question. The question is simply this. Have you been born again? Have you been made new? Have you been born again? Have you been made new? If your story is the story that says, "You know what? I'm just going through the motions." Today, your story can change. You can be transformed by the grace of Jesus. And if you haven't experienced that yet in your life, I would love to be able to pray with you and for you today. But before we pray together, I want to tell you guys something that's so awesome. You can look up for a second. I want you to see something on the screen. We believe that we're going to, with this series, we're kind of kicking off something really, really powerful. You've been hearing stories throughout the summer. You'll hear one pretty much every week in this series. Stories of how God has transformed a person's life. And we are going to begin praying for and believing that God can write 1,000 stories of awakening. 1,000 stories of faith, hope, and love here through Awaken Church, through you, through me, through what we do here. And a story of awakening doesn't have to be, "Hey, I came to Jesus when I was far from him." A story of awakening can simply be, "You know what? I never did anything, and now God has called me to serve, and he's called me, and he showed me how I'm supposed to serve him." Or I never loved my spouse the way that I was supposed to love my spouse, and God has awakened something in our marriage. Those are stories of awakening. But I believe that God has called us to write 1,000 stories of awakening, 1,000 stories of faith, hope, and love. And we're going to begin to pray for that every single week. And I want you to begin praying for that. And I want you to begin seeking out opportunities in the people all around you, and how their story could be written with your help through your life. And so if you're here this morning, if your story is, "I've gone to church, gone through the motions, prayed the prayer," and you feel like you're in kiddie pool Jesus mode, today's the day for you to take that step of faith and say, "God, I want to be made into something brand new." Let's pray together. Father, for every single one of us in the room today, God, we pray for your grace, for your love, and your mercy. God, God, we desperately need a relationship with you. And God, before we leave this room today, I just pray that you would help us to experience that grace fresh and anew. And if our story has been, I've just been going through the motions, or I just prayed a prayer, God, hit us like a bus today with your grace. Let it transform us in a way that we can't comprehend or understand. God, help us to be made new. And let that be our story from this moment forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. You guys have a great Sunday. We will see you back next week, 9 or 10. Don't forget, stop by the connection table so you can get all the info about all the things.
I'll meet you back up here.